Hey guys, today we're going to talk about setting your chart screen or your map window, which is this window right here, up just like I set up for one of the elite anglers when I was down in an open house this past winter. So if you want to, you can pause it right here, go out, grab turn your unit on, put the video right next to it and play along, and you can set yours up at the same time I'm setting it up. That'll save you some time. Or you can just play through and then remember everything and then do it at a later time. But anyway, so I want to try to share this with you, because if you just use these things out of the box, they work pretty good. But on the other hand, it'd be really nice to have them set up just like, in a very efficient manner. That basically the way I set it up for the Elite Pro. He's well known. You guys, if you heard the name, you'd know exactly who he is. But anyway, he asked me to do this for him. So let's get started. First thing we want to do, okay, very first thing, let me put my glasses on so I can see the screen here, is we're going to deal with map selection. So first thing you want to do is make sure you got the right map selected on the machine, okay? So you go over here to more options, okay? If you look at the very, very bottom down there, it says chart source. This one's set on the CMap Contour Plus. There we go. So right now, because there's no map chip in this unit itself, it's just empty slots. You got two choices. You got the Contour Plus, which is the built-in maps, which are great for most of the country. But if you're on a border with Canada, you won't see the Canadian waters, at least in the live version. Okay, you will in the Pro, but not in the live. Okay, so the other option is Navionics. Now the neat thing is, you plug a Navionics chip in, it'll ask you, do you want to use this map? Yes or no? So again, first thing you check, make sure you got the map that you want to use selected. I have found that there are some maps that are good for certain lakes and other maps that are good for other lakes. I've also found maps that are good on part of this lake and part of that lake. So on my boat, I run two different maps at the same time. So, okay, so that's the very first thing you want to do. Okay, so now the second thing to do is set up your map orientation. And the way to do that is to go to more options. Okay, oops. And this, if you see the orientation here, it says north up. That's the default. So by default, this is like you're holding a paper map, always pointing north as you're driving around. The problem is that maybe you're running south, now your map's backwards or upside down from where you're really going to go. What I did for him is I set the orientation to what's called heading up, okay? And what that does is that as the boat is moving and it's heading in a certain way, that's the way the map is pointing. Now you see that I'm sitting here with no compass at all, and the map's slightly spinning around a little bit, okay? Now that's because it doesn't know what my heading is. If I had this 0.1 here, let me see if I can grab it for you. If I had this 0.1 hooked up, okay, on the NEMA bus, and I had the compass set up as the heading sensor, then this map would be correct, okay? So basically wherever that's set, the map will stay stationary. The one thing about heading up is that as soon as you start moving on your boat, it will figure out where your heading is, and it locks in very, very quickly. So that's the second item you want to do, okay? So we're going to set heading up. You notice we're still spinning around. So let's do something else. The other thing I set up for him is I set up what's called look ahead. And where this is really important, let's just zoom in to say, we'll go to Winnipesaukee, which is not really one of my favorite lakes, but anyway, it's a lake. So we'll be over here at Winnipesaukee. Now what we're going to do is we're going to set this look ahead. So if you look over here in the menu, this says look ahead. So you click that. Now what happens is the map gets rotated down here. So let me clear this, first clear the cursor. Okay. Oops. That was not a good thing. Okay. But we've got now look ahead set. You'll notice that the cursor went from the middle of the screen down the lower 25%. Okay. The advantage of that is that as you're driving, you don't really care where you were. You more care about where are you going. And when you're going somewhere, you really want to be able to say, okay, I want to see as much of the map as possible. I use my driving map basically the one I used for driving, is always set to this. Now, one disadvantage of this is if you get to your location and you say you want to start scanning around, you might want to turn the look ahead off, and I'll put the cursor back. See how I put the cursor back in the center of the screen? So once it does that, now you got the full map around you. Now you can look around, okay? So, but again, look ahead is very, very handy for being able to see where you're going. The fourth thing, and this is kind of fun, and because you've got this cursor arrow, well, the arrow is sometimes a little hard to see as you're driving. The nice thing, what you can do, is we go to pages, okay? We hit settings. Now we come down to chart. And you see on chart, there's something called heading extension here. We're going to turn that on. And what it does is it extends that cursor on your screen out X number of, basically it's a 1 mile extension, okay? You can see the, you can actually set the value on that. Right now it defaults to a mile. I keep mine at a mile, and that's pretty handy. If you have it, if you're running really short distances, shorter distances would be nice, but be honest, that having that set for 1 mile all the time gives you an idea of about what it is. So you have to think about, oh, is that half a mile now setting or 20 feet setting? So just leave it at a mile and you'll be good there. So you go to, again, settings, chart, heading extension, turn that on, and then just check your extension length to make sure it's set to 1 mile. All right, so that's the fourth item. Now you can see on the screen here, that mile is marked off. We got half a mile, quarter mile. Again, if you flip over to kilometers, it'll be the same thing, relatively speaking, okay? So it's pretty handy. Now the neat thing is if you start zooming the map in, okay, start zooming in, you'll see that heading extension stays the same length, but it actually grows on the screen, but the proportion's the same. So now this is half a mile, that's a quarter mile. And the neat thing about that is you start driving into a place, and as you get closer and closer and closer, well, what's going to happen is that now I usually zoom in as I get closer to where I'm going. So now it's telling me I'm getting very close. I can actually use those indicators to tell me about how far I am from something. All right. So that's the next thing. Okay. And since, and the final item, which is the fifth item here, and again, these are very simple setups for you, but again, makes you very efficient on the water. So the last thing I want to do is I want to set the depth palette. And the nice thing about a depth palette is that, for example, if you're running in an area where there's a bunch of boulders and stuff that pop up, or not necessarily boulders, but shoals, for example, like the St. Lawrence River, it pops up with shoals all over the place, okay? By turning on your depth palette, it makes it very easy. Say, or for example, in the springtime, you're looking for shallow bays, having a depth palette colored up for you makes life really simple. So what you do is you hit more options, okay, and we go to chart options, okay. It's a little bit different here. You got to go down to chart options. Now, you don't see it here. What you have to do is scroll it up. We're going to turn the depth palette. Boom. Turn that on from navigation, which is by default. We're going to change it to our depth shading version, okay. So that's going to turn the depth shading on for us. Now the next thing you want to do is come back over here, go to your shading option. Okay, on the shading, turn depth 1 on. If you don't like those colors, you can go back and you can either customize it or use number 2. Pretty much 1 and 2 are pretty similar. But again, this is a very handy. So let's go to a real lake here. If I can find one. Well, here's one. You can see now by looking at this, the map, the chart, you can see how the colors are there. You can immediately see that lake there. Whoops, let me scroll it out, zoom it out, there we go. So you can see there's a big hole in that lake, or deep pocket, okay. We can also see a whole bunch of shallow along the edges, which I expect. But what's weird is that we got this giant flat bay in the southeastern end of it. Again, it depends on how this map is rotated, but we can see that. Oh, that's Onway. Actually, that lake is just about 5 miles away from the house here. And the thing about this lake is the ramp is right about here, okay? And you got some boulders. So you now pretty much know, probably don't want to take your boat through this little area here where the island is, okay? See that? Because it's pretty rocky in there. And I know that from actually being on this lake several times. And like I say, the ramp's sitting here. This is all rock. There's some boulders out in here, so you got to be careful. And then you got the deep hole in the other end there, okay? But the nice thing about this depth pallet, it lets you quickly visually see what you're going towards, okay? So those are the 5 settings that the Elite Pro wanted me to set up for him, and I did that. Now, the one thing I didn't set for him, which I like to do, is setting up what are called range rings. And the range rings I find very handy, at least for where I'm going. A lot of times I'll be running out 60, 70 miles out into the lake, and I want to have an idea of about where I am, how close I'm getting. What I turn on are these range rings here. So this is, oops, yeah, we'll leave that alone. Turn the range rings on, okay? And they will change in size depending on how much zoom you have in. So now the range ring is actually back at now. They're the range rings. What happens if you zoom to another area, you obviously lose your range rings because you're not in the vicinity of where your cursor is located, okay? So that's something to just be aware of. So now that we've got the optional range rings on here, now we can see where they are. If you look in the bottom right, it tells you what those range rings are. 0.2 miles. Okay. So actually, no, sorry, half a mile. Okay. So the half a mile, you see it's coincident with the half mile marker. So as I zoom this in, you can see now I've got 1 mile range rings. It changes over here 1 mile. Basically, I can't read that as I'm driving, and it'd be nice to be able to blow that up, but you can't do that. So that's the range rings. Like I say, I like those quite a bit. He just didn't want it because he felt it like it cluttered up the screen. To me, it reminds me kind of a radar pattern on the screen. So those are 5 setup items for your chart page, okay, or your map page, okay, that the elites use. And this is one of the big, like I say, big time elite guys that he had me set up for him. I thought I'd just share this with you. And the other piece is the range rings, something I like to do optional. So if you hope you picked up something on this. Again, setting up your map is really crucial to efficiently using your unit on the water and getting to someplace fairly quickly. All right, thanks. I appreciate it. If you liked the video, please like it. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. If you think you're subscribed, just double check to make sure that you are subscribed. But anyway, I certainly appreciate you, and thank you. Bye.